Hey everybody, how you doing? Thank you for joining us. We have a lot to get through, an all-star panel and a really great topic. The topic you've come for is the strategies to master the market now with the right mortgage technology. And we've got a panel full of masters here to help you do that. I'm going to start off by introducing our panelists. Start with Jody Hall. She's the founder and CEO of Danda Road. She's the former COO of NMB and Cross Country. Then we have Christy Sukumnu. She is the Chief Lending Officer of UFCU. She's formerly working at Flagstar. Raven Johnson is our next panelist. She's Vice President of Business Systems at Legacy Mutual Mortgage. We have Craig Ungaro, Chief Operating Officer of AnnieMac Home Mortgage. And Sophia Rosado, President and GM of Flowify. And of course, you have myself. I'll be the moderator, Vice President of Marketing at Truve. So let's kick it off. What I'm showing you right now on the screen are the past 5 years average cost increases for the average mortgage lender. Over the last 5 years, lenders report they've increased tech costs by about 2.5% each year, and they expect that to continue over the next 5 years. So the first question that we'll start off with, and this question I'm going to give it first to Raven. Are you seeing annual costs of mortgage technology go up by around this amount? And if so, what's driving those costs?
Yeah, definitely. I would love to say it was just 2.5% or so, but I think historically there's definitely a 2 to 5% increase built into many agreements with my tech partners, just as a standard year-over-year growth. But that's a low number based on the increases I've seen proposed recently. It's been much higher. I think generally the justification is inflation, but it does not seem to really be in line with inflation necessarily. I think maybe a more controversial theory might be that companies that are mainly relying on the depressed mortgage industry right now could be pricing in recent losses. Don't hate me for saying that, but I would hope that means we would see a price reduction when production increases again. But ultimately, because ultimately it's the consumer who pays that in the end. It's difficult to know really how the increases should be right now because they're all over the board.
So we'll open it up to the rest of the panel if anybody wants to chime in and perhaps maybe share what percentage they kind of plan for in your operating plans when you're thinking about what costs will increase, for the year, this year or next year.
I think one of the interesting things is you have to plan for two types of costs increase. One is what are the increases in your current vendor contracts, but also what are the new technologies that you have to add to your budget? And so when we talk about the budgeted spend, I see that increasing by more than this 5%. Because we're constantly having to look at our tech stack and constantly adding new things to meet consumer expectations and our own internal teammate expectations.
Love it. Jody, Craig, do you guys have anything to add? Should we jump to the next topic?
I think we'll cover it in the next topic.
Awesome. All right. Share my screen again. And all right, now this is honestly going to get some of you pretty fired up. I was at the MBA's IMB conference this year, and costs were central and on stage for almost every session, and specifically for verifications and credit. Actually, my company Truve was invited on stage to showcase our income and employment verification solutions, specifically because lenders are looking for about the 80% savings cost over the work number. Who've raised their prices dramatically over the years, along with like FICO, and lenders were really heated about this. So I've got a couple stats I'm going to share with the panel to get them fired up. Because hopefully this is the costs are near and dear to all of our hearts here, and you can see FICO's increases this was increase in 10%. It was increased in 2023 for the largest 46 lenders, 200%. For the 6 lenders in the middle tier, and then 400% for all the other lenders. And in 2024, analysts are expecting prices to double, right? So the cost of pulling credit's going way up. And if you take a look, I pulled this because I was just interested in this, and I saw that if you look at FICO's market cap and their share price, coincidentally from like May 2023, that's about the same time that they raised prices that their stock price is going up by the same amount, right? And these are borderline government kind of sponsored monopolies, if you want to think about it. I mean, it's the way the industry runs, but it's making it very hard on the consumer. And then finally, I wanted to share that the Work Numbers prices have also increased from 2017 to 2020 by 110%, 2020 to 2023. So this guy gives everybody here an understanding about why people were fired up, at IMB. And so the question that I've got, and Jody, I'm going to let you start with this one, is, how are you advising clients? And let me stop sharing so everybody can see you. How are you advising clients to manage the cost increases? I mean, these are significant for lenders.
Yeah, so before I answer your question, I don't think that you had to show the stats to get this group fired up, but I will, speaking of fired up, so 2 years ago, I was sitting at the Chase Housing Summit in New York, and Sandra Thompson was speaking, and we had just seen a significant, it's in December, so we already knew where the Work Number and where credit models were going. Well, we actually didn't know where credit was going. We got the announcement that said there's going to be a 10% increase for some, I don't even know what the percentages were. And so when there was an opportunity to ask questions, I asked Sandra Thompson, when we are talking about being able to create more home affordability and allow more people to participate in the home buying process, what do we do to compete against the rising costs of loan production? And she said, write to me, write to FTC, write to everyone. So I have written to every initial that exists. I have asked the question in Washington, D.C. of FHFA directly. FTC never got back to me. I might have got flagged as being too aggressive in my communication. But I did have several conversations. And the biggest point is that there needs to be competition in those areas. And we've seen companies like Truve and others who have become a competitor in the verification of employment and asset space, which will inherently help drive down cost. And also, with just the increase in technology and access to data becoming more and more accessible, the vendors that can put that information together in the least frictional type of vehicle to get it to the consumer, that's also going to keep those costs down. As for FICO from the cost, it's interesting that FHFA also started looking at a different scoring model when they jumped the prices. And this is Jody theory, not given to me by anyone else, but I see it as a money grab. We're only going to have a monopoly for a very short period of time. So let's go grab what money we can until we start seeing other scoring models come and creating that competition. But as a whole, to answer your question, the advice I give those about driving down any type of cost when it comes to technology in the industry is work with your existing vendors, and they're not your vendors. They're your strategic partners. And if you've built a relationship with them and you're having open, transparent dialogue about the cost of their services, they'll help solve problems for you, which will also help drive down cost. So, and then educate yourself. Know what the others, who are the competitors out there? What do they offer that's different than the other one? Because you may see a small increase in cost, but if this partner does 7 different things that my existing partner does, then my existing partner either needs to catch up and do those 7 other things, or they need to cut my cost to be equal to the service that they are providing. So I definitely think communication is paramount, and really seeing the vendors that you work with as strategic partners that are fighting this together, and get those vendors and those partnerships solving problems together. Because we don't have, as mortgage lenders, we don't have the time to go and look at the 50 different verifications of income and employment resources out there. So you got to talk to your friends, rely on them a little bit, pare down the group, talk to your existing partners to see who their competition is, how do they do things differently. And then also take a look at how you're being charged. Is it success-based, or are you paying seat licensing? I have seen so much money thrown out the window because no one audits your seats. Someone, oftentimes your pricing engine is based on the number of seats that you have. Well, we have seen a complete contraction in the number of loan officers that need to have access to. Did anybody go back and audit that? I've seen thousands of dollars go out the door on a monthly basis because no one's auditing your seat counts for resources that you're charged that way. And then also, if you have that partnership, you can really challenge minimums. And, a lot of, I hear that if you're a publicly traded company, or for those companies that aren't publicly traded, that they like to act like they're publicly traded, that they use the minimum so they can report and forecast what amount it is that they're going to have in revenue to their board. And I understand that, but if you're working with IMBs specifically, with the way that business is, like, you're just hoping to keep the doors open. You're not worried, you don't care about whether a service provider can report an exact amount to their group. So also challenge them on minimums, or maybe even a different way of paying, where if you have a minimum for the entire year, maybe the amount gets leveled out on a monthly basis so the lender knows what they're paying for. So those are some ideas that I have around it. And most of the things, the advice that I give, I've learned from my mistakes. So I probably have violated a few of those rules and learned along the way.
Hey, everybody. Jody Hall is on LinkedIn. Go look her up if you want to talk to her about your operations and get some consulting advice. Reach out to her. Craig, Christy, Raven, Sophia, any of you want to chime in on that? I'm sure that some of these topics had to have you pretty fired up.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, as being one of those technology partners, not technology vendors, but partners, is that's a key part of the conversation. We've had to be flexible as well, whereas traditionally we have been subscription-based, seat-based. We're experimenting with hybrid pricing because our clients need that. And in some cases, it's, sweetheart deals that have happened years ago that need to be right-sized, and the market does push you towards that. You have to be viable on both sides. Both your technology partners, especially if they're a core partner to your operations. You don't want to get into a situation where it's a race to the bottom either, because then that's going to impact. I heard, for example, one of our clients recently said they tried to call up a different vendor partner and no one's answering the phone because there's no customer service, because they've really had to lower that down during that time. So you got to be careful too as to what you're giving up when that kind of race to the bottom conversation happens during these peaks and valleys in mortgage. And it truly is a partnership. Is there a unique way that you can negotiate those deals so that both organizations are successful and sustainable for the long term? Because ultimately that's what you want from a good partner too. But I agree with you that now is not the time to be rigid in terms of thinking from a pricing perspective. It's about who's got the best experience, who's solving your actual problems, and can they partner with you to do that.
And the data is important too, right? So, and having the partner again. If your partner can tell you, well, your business tends to go down this road, so here's the data on what your scores tend to be. So if we can give you a waterfall where, anything under this score gets a hard stop and you pull one bureau, then over that score, you pull all three bureaus. So your partners know your business and can right size you and be creative with some options that you might not have considered before.
Yeah, 100%.
And all the things that Jody said, I actually agree with Richard in that you should look up Jody and see if she can get you to work with her in a consulting capacity, because I have for sure. And so as a peer, we definitely have used each other a lot. But Jody hit the nail on the head on a bunch of different things, right? One is your vendors are your partners, and really try to sort of solve the problem with them. And then the auditing function, which I think is definitely overlooked in a lot of ways, and that those two things really hit home for me. And I would certainly want to say reinforce those 2 points.
I got to agree with Craig and Richard. Jody's great to work with, and I know that she's like embarrassed that we're over here talking about her, but she really does bring a great perspective to the table. And when we talk about auditing, I would jump in and say, not only do you need to audit the bills on your contracts and look at how that works, you need to audit the technology. What did you acquire that your team is no longer using? Or where do you have a partner that you're not using everything and you could eliminate something that's costing you additional dollars because maybe things have evolved and changed over time? When I think about my partners in technology, my expectation is that they continue to innovate and that they continue to drive change. But just because they're doing that doesn't mean that message always gets back to our team and that we're implementing those things. And if you can use this time when you're really thinking about, I love how somebody put it this morning in a meeting, putting your spending on a diet and getting it truly skinny, look at where you can go deeper in the relationships that have provided you value. That creates better organizational function on both sides and allows for better productivity.
Love it. Love it. All right. I'm going to jump to the next topic here. Those were all really, really good points. And Jody, I hope you're appreciating and glowing over there because everybody was just talking about how amazing you are. You are. We love you.
I'm flattered. Thank you.
Yeah. Sophia, let's talk about the pace of innovation. So we all know some of the main drivers of the cost of technology or regulation, and new technologies in the hands of competition. Got to be competitive. So how about you help us out here? How do you advise your clients when you're talking to them? How do you advise them to invest in technology?
Yeah, it's a great question. And a lot of us want to start with you need a CRM and a POS and an LOS. But if anyone starts describing it that way, it's the wrong conversation. You really cannot throw around buzzwords on tech stack and all that. It's really about solving problems. So define that success up front. So define your success up front. What does success for your organization look like? Is it, might be to improve pull-through rates by 15%, might be to increase borrower CSAT by 25%, accelerate time to close by 30%, increase leads from channel partners, especially since those channels are changing now with everything that's happening externally. Some of these are hard ROI costs, right, that you can measure, and some of them are soft. LO recruitment, your total enterprise value for the organization when you make some of these changes, improved employee satisfaction, and borrower experience. Some of these things are hard and soft costs. And so if you can come up with your own internal ROI and define success, then the next thing you got to do is ask yourself, why haven't we achieved these goals yet? What's the friction? What is getting in the way of achieving those things? It could be a technology problem. It could be a process problem, could be a people problem, product problem, or a combination of any of those four things. And so getting really clear on that and getting away from the what's my tech stack is, I think, the way to plan for success. Because I think, you all said it very well, which is some of these technologies, including our own, people are using 10%, 20%, 30% of. You don't know what the other percentages are or the extent to which you could use them to solve those positive business outcomes, right? So I think Christy kind of hit the nail on the head with that one. So that's kind of the first thing I would do. The next thing to think about is then, do we need to start from a blank piece of paper? I know Raven, you and I have talked about this in the past, but she has set up her system where you've got the system configured for, say, a brand new loan officer. A loan officer that's new to the organization, a loan officer that is experienced and wants everything highly customized. And recruitment's a big deal right now. So you have to offer platforms that allow for that I don't like the word customization because that's expensive for everybody. It's configuration. If you can do configuration and you choose partners that can scale with you, and you can have that future vision planning where you think of yourself, what is my organization going to be 3 to 5 years from now? And then choose a partner who can grow with you so you don't have to rip and replace because the cost of transfer is real. That's the exercise to do. That's the strategic exercise to do. And, I think something that's very interesting in mortgage in particular, I come from a fintech background, that in mortgages, you have to sell top down and bottom up constantly. You're constantly recruiting LOs. As a technology partner, I'm also speaking with organizations, and we have 2 audiences that we need to look out for. And all of us, you kind of triangulate, all of us want the same outcome. And so that combination of being configurable, being able to scale, giving your LOs and your teams that configurability that you want, but at the same time starting with a blank piece of paper, what is my happy path? What does my digital journey look like for a borrower, for an LO, for an LOA, for a processor, for an underwriter? Sometimes we got to start from scratch because the technology is changing so quickly, and the decisions we've made in the past about technology have to do with processes that were made to fit into what was available versus starting with a clean sheet of paper and thinking about, is my process actually correct? So I know that's a lot to kind of throw out there, but we've done quite a number of studies that show this. We recently put out an ebook, for example, all around recruitment, and configurability, they call it customization, we call it configurability, was number 1. Is people want to be able to own their own experience, especially with these direct-to-consumer fintech providers that are competing with many lenders, is how do you put your own personality out there, and how do you give that to loan officers in a way that's scalable for the organization? And that's where I think it's an important thing to think about.
That was an awesome answer, Sophia. I don't know about you guys, but I was pretty blown away by that. Anybody else want to chime in there?
Nope. I will give you a case study, though, to prove that Sophia is not just giving a answer that was predetermined in the podcast. I actually called Sophia with a problem. And I said, listen, I'm trying to fit all of the pieces together, and I can't help but think that there's a better way to do business in that a larger piece of the ecosystem is just there and just works for us. It has to just work for the lender. And she was like, well, what pieces are you talking about? And I start going through verifications and lead gen to lead funnel to CRM to point of sale and everything in between, all of the verifications. And she was like, well, we don't do all of that, but we partner with this one and we partner with this one, and I can work with them and I can figure this out. So that she has that willingness to adapt to the needs of particular clients, but she also is prescriptive in that. And that's the part I think that a lot of tech companies are missing. Mortgage lenders they're busy running the business. They don't have time to make every decision about configurability. Oh my goodness, they could, if you tell them that they can configure the entire platform, but you don't come with some prescriptive measures, then they're never going to launch the product because they're never going to get all of the decisions made because they don't have time to, or they don't have the knowledge to be able to do it. So being willing to work with others to solve problems across the industry, and then also being prescriptive into what you're bringing to the table is extremely important and is extremely helpful to the industry.
You hit on a really great point, Jody. And when I think about Richard and Sophia here, one of the things is, for whatever reason, we stumble onto one partner or one provider. And in some cases, they have very closed systems and they aren't integrated with anybody else. And the expectation is, hey, yeah, you might need another partner, but you've got to go and do that on your own. To your point, none of us on this call or on this podcast have time to do that. And so it's very helpful if I can call Richard and Richard can go, you know what, Sophia's got something for you, or vice versa. And there's this open ecosystem that they've already built a lot of those connections, which makes cost of implementation and time of implementation a lot less. Plus, you can have confidence that these systems are going to work together, and it's going to create the right in my case, member experience, and others' cases, customer experience, it's going to put you ahead of the page when you're looking at those things. And that's something you can't overlook when you're thinking about your tech stack.
Well said.
I love it. All right. I'm going to jump on to our next question because I want to make sure we get through all of them in the time that we've got. We're going to talk about Tech Foundation. Sophia, you stole a little bit of my thunder, but it's totally cool. We hear the term tech stack thrown around a lot, right? It's a common buzzword in the industry, and some use it sort of like a flex, right? To flex their knowledge of tech with their peers. I think a lot of the publications like to talk about it a lot, the big major publishers in the industry. And others use it, like you were talking about, Sophia, in recruiting employees, specifically loan officers. I think a lot of loan officers and their teams are used to using certain tech, or maybe they're impressed by certain cutting edge tech. So my question now is to Christy. Christy, like for you, what are the aspects? What are the aspects of a solid tech foundation?
We talked earlier about how do you judge success? And for me, I judge my tech stack success on the fact that nobody thinks about it and nobody cares what is my POS or my LOS or how am I verifying this, because everything just works. When they get ready to do something, it's easy, it's intuitive, and that is both for my internal teammates and my external partners, and for my consumers, my members that are getting a service through us. If they have to think through and be walked through 15 steps, we have failed in creating the right tech stack. Your tech stack isn't to be glamorous. It's not to showcase who and what you do. It's really about serving the needs of the person using it. And so that's the fundamental starting point for me. When I do an audit is, are we using the tech that we have? Is it providing what we need in terms of both efficiency and member experience? And then where do we have gaps? Right? And so that's how I approach it. I don't know, Jody, Craig, thoughts?
Yeah, I kind of agree, and Sophia said it earlier too. Like, it's the wrong conversation, right? It's the journey, it's the experience, and I think that's really where the conversation should start. And then the technology really is sort of a solution towards that. I think in this industry, there are very few people, if any, that really have anything that is proprietary or something. So even if you are flexing, which I try to do as often as possible, by the way. No, even if you are flexing on technology, it's something you bought. So it's not even like something that you should. I mean, if somebody else has access to it, there really is no flex to be had. So I do agree with you on that. I think it's got to be solution oriented. And then very much like if it would crack me up when you said if nobody talks about it, it's a good thing. You're absolutely right. I don't know that there's a technology out there that's like insert your technology name, insert your partner name, and everybody's bragging about it. However, if it's a problem, that's when you hear that's when you hear the partner's name come up often. So yeah, I agree on many fronts there.
And everybody wants the shiny new thing, right? So you have to look at all those shiny new things that come out and say, what problem do I have that this really intends to solve? What goal do I have to achieve that this can help me get there? What are the facts? Because everybody comes in all the time to my office or calls me up and says, oh my God, have you seen this? Or, oh my God, have you seen that? And we all know that the shiny thing, once you dig in, you either already have it, or it's doing the same thing as something you already have, or it's just not what it's saying it is. So we really have to dig in and not just go for the shiny new thing.
Yep, I love it. So
That's can I say one last thing about something Raven just mentioned? This is such an important point because what we've seen is we have clients that run the spectrum in terms of size. So it might be someone who started off as a broker, then a 10-person brokerage, then a small lender, then a medium lender, large lender, and then back again, in this market. And oftentimes these organizations get built by people who have the shiny new thing syndrome, and don't necessarily change or think about the whole, how the operational model works as they scale the organization. And the biggest mistakes that I see are things like cost of transfer and not understanding the true cost of lacking integration. You could have the most amazing new AI feature, but if it's not integrated to anything or to a true data set, that is unique, then it almost doesn't matter, right? So you gotta really, it's the things that are boring that you gotta ask about, which is integration and, cost to transfer. So some of the mistakes to think about when changing technology.
Yeah, and I also advise mortgage technology companies as a strategic lending advisor. And my first piece of advice to them, do not make up a problem that you are riding in on the white horse to solve. Find out what the problem is and then build your technology to solve the problem, because then you have to sell two things. You got to go and sell the lender that they have the problem, and then that you have the solution to solve the problem that they didn't even know that they had, and it drives me berserk.
Jody, I think that's called confirmation bias in the mental model map, is make up a problem to solve.
So funny.
It happens so often, and then it's like the new shiny object, and like, it's like I've had leaders of mortgage IMBs like walk up to me and show me, like, we'll have like a physical thing and show me at a conference, like, oh, you got to get on this, you got to do this. Like, well, what does it do? Well, I don't know. Well, then why do I need it?
Absolutely. I love it. There's some great takeaways there. Does it actually work? I love that, Christy, right? Does it integrate with things? Does it do what we say what it says it's going to actually do? And finally, do you actually have a problem that it's solving, right? And building towards that. I love it. Craig, I got a question for you here. Different technologies touch many stages of the borrower journey, and some are hard to directly measure ROI, right? Lots of examples there. In a recent poll I ran in a prior webinar with hundreds of lenders, I asked them to rate the ROI of their technology on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being really high, 1 being terrible. And the majority came in between like 4 to 6, like straight up ho-hum. Everybody's kind of like, meaning they're not exactly blown away. So, how do you measure the ROI of your technology? And, why do you think lenders have such low perceptions of the ROI of their tech partners?
Yeah, so why I think they have a negative perception is because they weren't really honest with themselves on what it was going to do in the first place. And that is twofold. One, you didn't know how to measure what you were going, and ROI should be like in terms of percentage, and but you shouldn't always look at every solution like that, right? So you should say to yourself, would I pay for this experience? Maybe you're saying, would I pay for this customer satisfaction or employee satisfaction? In my case, some distributed retail for branch and sales satisfaction. So sometimes you're buying something and it's not always like a return, but I think we're all conditioned, again, buzzword city, right? AI and machine learning and all that, ROIs there, and so we're always thinking we have to, if we paid $1 for it, I better get $1.25 back. And how you realize that, whatever that is different every time. And I think, some people will, and I think technology providers and partners are sort of prepared for that question. So they are ready for answers. And then we probably take it at face value. But you really have to say to yourself, one, am I really going to get that level of utilization out of it? And then am I going to realize there's a difference between efficiency and productivity, right? Efficiency is saving somebody time. Productivity is using something with that excess time, right? So, if I save time for an underwriter to just surf on the web for more time, I'm not getting an actual return. I've just made their jobs easier, and that's what it is, right? But if I'm actually able to then insert a new file into their day or whatever the excess, bandwidth allows for, that's when the return is there. But if you're not measuring those things in the first place, then you're never going to realize what it is. And so you're left kind of holding the bag, and maybe you're just too ambitious out of the gate. Maybe, you're trying to get somebody to buy into this vision that, because you got pretty excited about a demo. In your position, you're like, I just kind of want to sell people. It's going to do this. It's going to do this. It's going to do this. But one, the users don't believe that, or, again, you've maybe made up your own problem to solve. And so those are probably a bunch of reasons on why it is an issue. I would say the other one is if you look at, we have a term called, and maybe this is widely used, I'm not sure, but with tech debt. And we're guilty of it as well, right? So we bought technology on top of technology. And then, the last couple of years have been tough. So we're all trying to figure out where we can squeeze expenses. And you start looking at these technologies and you really look at your tech stack beyond sort of CRM, point of sale, and LOS. You start looking at even all the other ones, the communication forums, the virtual meeting rooms that you have, all these different stuff. And you start looking at them. And then that's when you realize, wow, we bought stuff we already had, right? We just continued to buy on it. And so that's probably another one of those sentiments that really turns people off a little bit. It's like, you know what, I'm you burned me before, but really you burned yourself. It's your discipline that you lacked. It's your sort of lack of measurements and controls. And if it's always just going to be pure ROI, you're probably going to continue to get disappointed in that. And you're probably going to continue to rate it exactly like that.
Love that. Anybody want to pile on the ROI?
I also think it's the length to ROI. So we have a very short attention span in the mortgage industry. Like, what was the question? Just kidding. But we have a very short attention span in the industry. So we need to partner with vendors who can help with implementation and change management. Lenders do not have the knowledge and the resources to effectively implement your technology to realize return on investment in a short enough period of time that I remember why I invested in the technology to start with. I've moved on to the next thing. So I think it's very important. And again, a challenge to tech companies is have strong implementation and change management teams that help the lenders. Otherwise, the lender's going to be frustrated and you're not going to get back in the office. And you're going to have lost the opportunity to gain a meaningful relationship that is sticky for the future.
Jody, that's an excellent point about the implementation team, because a lot of times what I've experienced both anecdotally in my career and I hear from some of our partners is, well, the lender's complaining about the ROI, but they didn't implement it like we said. They implemented this piece and that piece, and they stuck to their old processes. So of course there's no return because you didn't do the fundamental changes that are necessary. There was zero change management process. There was zero doing the things that are what we were going to do to create that return for you. And so a lot of times it's on us as lenders to ensure that we have that process, but it's also incumbent upon the vendor when they go through that implementation to say, hey, here are some best practices. And if you don't do this, you're not going to get that ROI that we talked about.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually a really good best practice too, which is, and I'm sure we're all guilty of, you get a project off the ground and you're just on to the next project, but there's not that 90-day, 120-day check-in to say, did it realize what you expected it to? And that level of accountability really does course correct for the next sort of idea that you come up with. And it also, it also, if you tell your vendor partner that's what we're going to do, that you're not going after we sign the contract. You're here till day 90 or day 120, whatever it is. It may also be advantageous for them because then they can use that in their next testimonial rather than just go talk to Craig. This is what I did for Craig. That's far more impactful. And then when somebody calls me and asks me about that technology, and I can test, I can say, yeah, that's exactly what they did for me. I think that probably helps in the next pitch for them.
Can I ask a quick follow-up question? Because we've got some amazing operators here. So I'm really curious if you had to pick your number 1, 2, or 3 ROI metric that is unique, maybe not some of the ones I noted around, CSAT and pull-through rates and things like that. But Craig, you just said something about adding 1 extra file to a processor. What are some of the other ones that you all think are really move that needle in operations? Just curious, since we've got everyone here.
Contract to close.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh yeah, I was just saying contract to close is a big one. Time for contract to close.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about soft costs or unmeasurable return on investment. If anything can cut my emails in half when I was running companies, my executives and my mid-level managers to take the redundancy in the questions that everyone, if that could be removed, think about how much time would be given back to work on the projects, to work on change management, to work on implementation. I mean, you get 400 emails a day, and probably 300 of them are the same question, like it's redundancy in questions. And there's like 27 people copied on it and you don't know who's going to respond. And then 27 people start chirping in, responding to it. And it is just like this infinite mess of stupidity that could have easily been answered by saying, hey, you need to go to so-and-so to get your FHA logins.
I'll say we have one that's a little unique. I don't think it's the best metric in the world, but it's that I don't hear a lot of people talking about it, which is clear to close 3 days before closing. So rather than using duration as because like we do business in a lot of different places. So New York, for example, is dictated by the attorneys. So using cycle times there would be a little bit of a challenge for us. But if you had a clear to close 3 days prior to closing, our belief is that is probably a less stress environment, right? You probably don't have managers jumping in last minute, got to get this condition cleared, get it to the table. Borrowers probably not anxious because they probably knew what their cash to close was a day or two before. And so that's one for us. So when we can put something in place anywhere in the process and see an improvement in our clear to close success rate, that's kind of unique. I don't hear a lot of people talking about that, but to us, that's one that helps with what we would consider the customer experience, in addition to the traditional things like NPS.
Great.
I think for a lot of folks looking at, when you talk about cycle times, there's that pre-closing or contract to close cycle time, but there's also the close to get it off your warehouse line or get it sold to the investor or get it sold to the agencies, get it securitized, and reducing that can have a significant impact on your profitability.
Yeah. And if we could throw aspirational ones out there, I am looking for somebody to help us with time in file. I think that's probably one of the most, like if I could look at a breakdown and say how much time my underwriter spent in a file versus my processors and my closers, and I can actually sum up the minutes and hours built into a file, any sort of new sort of introductions of efficiencies in there, and I could see that being compressed, that would be a real value to me. So any technology provider,
I've got that.
Give me a call. You have it?
Yes.
Oh, let's talk.
Richard, you're on mute.
I say it wouldn't be a webinar on technology if somebody didn't have to say
Go
that.
wrong.
I think we got it, but Richard, give us the thumbs up. I think we went through all of the questions, perhaps, if we did. I do want to give you a shout out as well. We are in the process of Flowify is in the process of integrating Truve. That's launching very soon. I absolutely love working with Raven and has been a client for a long time, and meeting all of you. Just fantastic to be able to be on stage with such amazing operators. So thank you for the time. And Richard, I don't know if you're back or not, but if not, we really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.